Those with been said, not me. All right, so let's do it in this order. The summaries from last week, we'll briefly touch on them, and then we'll briefly discuss the seminar from today, and then we'll go into the lesson for today. So, so some of the things that I noticed in the summaries, one was subject-verb agreement. What are we talking about when we're saying subject-verb agreement? Very good, very good. So let me give you an example. A local issues confronting the world. What's the problem with that? A local issues.
You have to get rid of the A.
Right. So, very good. So you have to either get rid of one or the other. Either A has to go or the S in issues, a local issue. So this is one. Had led to the increased waste problems. What's the problem there? Had led to an increase, right? Either increased waste problems or increase in waste problems, right? There is also inadequate number of containers. There is also inadequate number. Well, first off, let's see it. So if you have inadequate number of containers, an inadequate number, there's an inadequate number. So either this is a thing of subject verb. Either you have to change this one from is to are, or you have to change the number to numbers, because here we're talking about number, which is singular, not referring to the containers, right? Let's continue. Another major issue is how pronunciation or mispronunciation can affect spelling, right? And this is something that we see somewhat often. What's the pronunciation here? What's the B? Very good. If we know that, we shouldn't have a problem. So sometimes when people say it, they'll say this. And then when they say this. So when you think they sound the same, right? So one thing, like it depends on where you are, I guess, coming from or pronouncing it, that generally the top one is a short sound. So this. Oftentimes in Ghana, it's replaced with a sound, like thus, right? I don't have a problem. But when these two start to sound alike to you, that's where you have the problems, and this is what I saw. When it was supposed to be this, it was written these. When it was supposed to be these, it was rather written this. So private institutions have tried to manage these wastes, and it will be so-and-so. These wastes. Now, waste is what we could refer to as a mass noun, right? So no matter how many there are, it's collective wastes. You understand? So it has to be this waste. It can't be these wastes. If you're talking about an individual product, you can say these waste products or these wastes, bins or whatever. But it has to be that. But again, the mass nouns, this is something that we have to really master, because it can trick you, because it's something that seems like it's plenty, but it's always considered just one big bulk. Right? Exactly. And then the next time, the main contributors of waste, here, the waste at this areas, the waste at these areas, right? So let's not beat a dead horse on that one. We have to just be clear. Where is this? Where the skips that has been provided have. Very good. Some of you are very good at this, so once we start doing peer review, you will be helping peers. So how would we help this one? The private institution like the Zoom Lion seem to be. The private institution like the Zoom Lion seem to be. Seems. So we can definitely seem to be doing well than the municipalities. Seems to be doing. Right. Doing well than, is that okay? Better. Right? This is where you have to start going into superlative forms. You can't do well than someone else. Now, this is than and more than is a problem in Ghanaian English in general, because usually we're thinking sing or chang or something like that, which is just one thing. So it's like I'm doing this, sing that thing, but it has to be more than or something. But usually it just is than, because that's all you would need in many of the indigenous languages. So this is sometimes transfer, right? Right? So I'm transferring what I know about this language into here. And the same problem happens if you know English and now you're trying to speak an indigenous language. So either way, you have to look at the influence of one coming onto the other one. So doing better than the municipalities. Then the first part, the private institution like the Zoom Lion. So the way I suggested, and there are a few ways we could deal with this, Zoom Lion, comma, a private institution, comma, seems to be doing better. That's what I thought sounded, a little bit better. The private institution like the Zoom Lion. You could say a private institution like Zoom Lion, right? So any of those can work. There's not only one single way oftentimes. This will save the nation a lot of health complication as well as any problem. Let me come again. This will save the nation a lot of health complication as well as not being exploited.
A lot of complications.
Complications. Health complications. Okay, let's continue. The presentation highlights for the need. Actually, that's okay. So what I was saying, that the presentation highlights the need to appreciate sanitation, highlights for the need to appreciate sanitation. It could go, but I would take the for out. It highlights the need as opposed to highlights for the need from someone. But this was actually a good paper. That was the only, I think, suggestion there. This was something else I actually looked up to see if this was an official thing, but it's not an issue for you per se. Township, as opposed to town. Is there a difference between a township and a town?
Would be a slightly bigger.
Right. In countries that recognize townships, right, and not all do, I actually was looking online to see if that's an official designation. Usually, and I actually saw something on TV, it was something like, speak your English proper. It was like, don't speak, that's the thing, yeah. And in it was saying township, people imported that concept from South Africa. Soweto Township, this township, so forth and so on. but it was saying that that's not a legal designation in Ghana. That you have, villages, you have towns, you have cities, you have municipalities, districts. All of these are different gradations, of land settlements and things of this nature. So it's saying, in not to use townships. So I actually looked online to see is that a legal thing in Ghana. And interesting enough, whether or not it is, there was a government of Ghana website that was using the term township. So I looked in, official records. You have these things, and township wasn't included, but people are using it because they're right. Even people who work for the government are using it as though it's a real, thing. So that's not something on you. That was the title. But I actually, for the first one, I said, is there a difference between town and township? I wrote that. But then I realized everybody's going to have that. So it's not so much your problem, but I wanted to highlight, this thing. We're not in Soweto, we're not in South Africa. The idea of township is going to be, an import. Because apartheid, we were all hearing about townships. But yeah, other countries also use townships, and like you were saying, it's seen as being a bigger thing, including the land surrounding the town, farmland, all these types of things. But yeah, that can be researched. Again, I didn't find township anywhere in terms of like a legal thing, but if you can find that, maybe you'll have more success than I did. Okay, the panel for the presentation were Dr. Osman, Dr. Arina Pieni, so forth and so on. Is there a problem with that? The panel for the presentation were Dr. Osman Al-Hassan. Okay. Okay, yeah, we can do that. The panelists so-and-so were. What I did, I left the panel, but because panel is, again, you have more than one person, so you would think, okay, let me use plural, right? But a panel is one thing, right? One group. Again, this is where we're talking about mass nouns of that nature. So the panel for the presentation, what I suggested was consisted of so-and-so and so-and-so, or comprised anything of that nature. Techimai is considered the basket of food in Ghana. Techimai is considered as the basket of food in Ghana. Is there any issue there? So now we're coming to idiomatic usages, right? Now, no town is really a basket of bread or a basket of food, but there is a set idiom, which is say this place is the bread basket of the Midwest, the bread basket of, the Middle East, quote unquote, anything like that. So these are, just idioms you have to become familiar with. Now, if you say Techimai is considered as the basket of food in Ghana, people will know what you're saying, but it will raise a red flag. It's a marked form. It's like, okay, whoever is writing this isn't a native speaker, which, that's not a punishable offense. But, these are some of the idioms that we want to try to keep in mind. Food wrappers. How do we write wrappers? Wrappers. That's what was missing. We were talking about kasahare.
Oh.
The food wrappers, yeah, I'm going to rap about food, yeah. I'm hungry. So, this is the thing, homophones, homonyms, things of this nature, those are the ones to keep track of. Okay, there were no widespread household collection of waste. There were no. Very good. Very good. Then the rest is okay. This should be. So with regards to heaps of waste dumps in Techi Mine and how it is being managed. With regards to heaps of waste dumps in Techi Mine and how it is being managed. With regard, yeah, that was the first thing, and that actually passed by me the first time. Now, in the US, I always grew up in regards to. When I came to Ghana and my supervisor said, with regard to, I said, okay. And it actually sounds a bit more dignified to my ears, so I said, okay, I'll, take down. But it seems like something is being mixed here. So, with regard to, and then to heaps of waste dumps. There's something odd about that construction. So, with regard to waste dumps in Techi Mine, that is not really like an idiomatic way to say heaps of waste dumps. You understand? So, with regard to waste dumps, and that one is fine. What is heaps of waste dumps, or what are? And how it is being managed. So, again, if we have dumps, which is plural, how they are being managed, how these dumps, plural, are being managed. With respects to foodstuffs. With respects to foodstuffs. With respect, very good. This was a spelling issue. I don't know how common this would be, but only 3 towns are carried off to the dump every day. Let me put it in better context. 210 tons, but only 3 towns are carried off to the dump every day. I think it was supposed to be tons. Yeah. So I don't, something like that, I wouldn't say that's a common issue. That would seem to just be something. Overspeeding. Thus the rest left are left, and as the days go by. Thus the rest left are left, and as the days go by. I think that's another overspeeding. Because these are things you wouldn't normally do if you're not, in a rush or something. Okay. By both the Municipal Assembly and Private Waste Collection Company. Let me come with the whole thing. In their quest to probe further the reasons for the mini dump site in the township, they found out waste is managed by both the Municipal Assembly and Private Waste Collection Company. Companies, right? Either that or a private waste collection company. I think the only one they mentioned was Zoomlion. I don't know if they mentioned something else, right? So in this case, I put a private waste collection company. Also, earlier on, the reasons for the mini dump site in the township. Exactly. If it's mini, you have to have many. The Municipal Assembly seemed to be facing a lot of problem in managing the waste. All right. So this is something that was, I need to cover this, because you see people do this one all the time.
You can use either and one.
This is a pronunciation thing influencing the writing again. But you see so many people do this. This is a very Ghana thing. Wow. Tell this to all your friends on Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever you're doing, because everyone does this thing. Whilst this is somewhat of a bit of an archaic type of form, because even what would normally come is wow. Wow. So this one is fine, this one is fine, but this one is, this is the mispronunciation of this affecting the spelling, right? Because who says whilst? No one gets that. You have to be eating plenty of, I don't know, tea and scones and crumpets and other British food to be able to force your mouth to do something like that. Whilst, right? This is very important if this shows up in your academic writing, because it can show up, you know, if you're doing some type of post on and something. But this, in the commercial level, at the commercial level, very good. This one came again, I wasn't sure if this was in the presentation. Heaps of refuse dump. Heaps of refuse dump. So what I did, I just put refuse dumps, plural, and then went on. Again, this heaps of refuse dump came again. So I was like, maybe that's how it was phrased in the presentation itself. But again, it's a bit some way. Either refuse dumps or heaps of waste or something, but it sounds stilted to say heaps of refuse dumps. They're refuse dumps. Yeah. I think the issue there is the, something. But the charges do not allow people of lower class to make use of their services. That's not bad per se, but I put in the lower class. This one I wasn't clear on. When refuse is camped, C-A-M-P-E-D, and get drenched from the rains. I wasn't sure the use of camped here. When refuse is camped and get drenched from the rains, what is that? Is that what that means? C-A-M-P-E-D. Like you're going camping. So my understanding of this verb camp is like, let's say I'm going camping, I'm going to a camp. I've never heard this when refuse is camped. I'm picturing refuse putting up tents, lighting a fire.
When you go to camp, when refuse are dumped, then I think mistakenly change to camp.
Okay.
It's like Baghdad, where it's really a camp, really. And it goes up and up and up, you know, and then the rain comes to dredge it with that background that it is written like that.
Whatever the background is, let's take that background away. Let's send it. So refuse does not go camping. Right? This is not an idiom that would be recognizable to anyone. Right? You may try to create your own idiom. I don't have a problem, but if you're trying to do something where people understand, refuse doesn't go camping. And get drenched. It should be gets drenched. And gets drenched. Techiman was misspelled with the T-E-C-H-I-E. I don't think it's extra E. Yeah? So, yeah, whether that's the anglicized or the G spelling, either way is. Dr. Samuel Osman Al Hassan as the lead panelist, right? So, panelist or presenter. The presenters indicated that increased population in Techimang is the major cause of waste management. Okay, exactly. So what I put with a question mark, problems, waste management problems, or waste, I wasn't clear, but that's fine. Waste production, if you want to take it from that angle, or the cause of waste management problems. I think this is pronunciation again influencing. Managing the waste poses health risk as a result of so and so.
Reading it.
Managing the waste poses health risk as a result of excessive pollution. I think by my emphasizing risk is letting you know that that's the issue. Risks. RISKS, risks. Health risks. Let me spell it for you. Risks.
There was an S added to it.
There should be
There
an
should
S
be.
added to it.
Oh, okay.
But people no one pronounces it like this.
Oh, I see.
At least in Ghana.
Mhm.
Risks. Health risks. So more than one risk. If it's just one health risk, that's a possible thing. So malaria is the only thing that comes out. This is the health risk associated with it. These are the health risks. Risks. Yeah. So this one is not a mass noun. Health risk is not a mass noun. You have to say these are the health risks. Bro Pedro.
I think it's a town in Ghana. Bring it to Ghana.
Yeah, I've passed by that town. This is something else. The health implication, it should have been the health implications. Unless there's only one implication, but that's not what we're saying. If that is the case, then we would have to specify the single health implication. The seminar also raised health implication of waste management problem. What else? No, raised is fine. That's past tense. Yeah, we're talking about something in the past. So that's one, health implications. But listen to the whole sentence again. The seminar also raised health implications of waste management problem. Okay, yeah, that's one way to correct it. Of waste management problems or of the waste management problem. If you want to say this is the waste management problem, you would need a definite article to come in there. $15 Ghana cedis to enable them operate efficiently. Again, about 15 Ghana cedis to enable them operate efficiently. What are we missing? To enable them operate efficiently.
I'm thinking that has the personified the
there's a word that's missing. To enable them to operate, right? So the to is missing. So you can't say to enable them operate efficiently. That doesn't go. So to enable them to operate efficiently. Or is this effectively? This was the last word that they wrote in there. They were trying to get it down, so I don't know if it's effectively or efficiently. I see effectively. So whatever that one is. So the seminary began. Seminar, right? So seminary is a place that I'm not sure, priests or something. Exactly. Good. Pressure, 2 S's in pressure. Techiman is one of the largest community in, exactly, one of the communities that are plural. This is one out of these. Also 2 M's in communities. Biggest, Biggest. Challenges, 2 L's. This is again pronunciation influencing. What's the problem?
Hips.
Yeah, but I'm a bit surprised. It looks like the WhatsApp we've been doing is affecting our record. Because these are very elementary that I on my own wouldn't commit it. But under circumstances of this nature, you make those elementary mistakes. So I want to believe the WhatsApp thing.
No, it's a social media thing.
It's true.
And the pronunciation too.
We write the thing with pressure, so we don't.
No, there's this thing like hue, and then hill. Ladies hue. No, people go like hill. So if you're not careful, it's not myself. Sometimes when I'm writing, I interchange the two. So I was corrected. Hill and then hue. Yes.
So in other dialects of English, these don't sound anything alike at all. So heel, hill, heel, hill. Alright? But again, this is the pronunciation having an impact. If the pronunciation starts to sound alike, and this is even for native speakers of English, so if you go to US or UK, things that sound alike to people, they end up spelling them, alike. Right. High heel. Not that one, so she's wearing a high heel. So this is heaps of rubbish, but it has become hips of rubbish. So this is one of the things that, if we're clear that heaps and hips don't sound alike, it's very difficult for you to spell them similarly when to your own hearing they don't sound anything alike. So for me, I could never make this mistake, but if I pronounce them alike, I could, perhaps. Yeah, the rest is mostly spelling, but these are the things that this is kind of what we're writing this by hand. We don't have access to internet per se, so whatever is here is what's going to come out on the paper. When you are writing in the comfort of your own home or whatever, anytime you have any question about spelling, always go to a dictionary, go online, go somewhere in order to verify it. So whatever the language I'm writing in, I always, even if I'm writing in English or I'm writing in anything, anytime I have any question, I always go and see what the thing is, right? If I'm writing in Chi, I'll go to the dictionary to get the proper spelling of whatever the thing is. If I'm writing in Yoruba, I'll go to the dictionary. And these are things that sometimes we take for granted, especially native speakers, and that's where native speakers start making errors that even non-native speakers who verify would never make. So sometimes I could say, oh, well, I'm a native speaker of it, so whatever. But even that, no. If I have any question and you're the only one who knows whether or not you have a question, anytime you have any question, go and check. This is where the learning is actually occurring, right? And then the other thing is, the more you read, the better your own writing will be. Because I remember, like, growing up, we would have these spelling bee competitions, and I always came back, they would give us plastic containers, they call it Tupperware containers. So I was always coming back with Tupperware containers, but why? Because I had read all these books. So at that time, I was never like, let me go to the dictionary. It's just I've seen it so many times that if I see it incorrect, something just pops up. That's not what I've seen these last 1,000 times that I've seen this word. So this isn't it. And then even when you're reading, you're writing, you're editing, you're seeing where the errors are just from exposing yourself to it. So one is go to dictionary, go to another source, but then also read a lot. The more you're reading, the more these things will just jump out at you like, I know that this isn't correct because I've seen it 1,000 times correct, right? Any questions about any of these?
There is this thing I always get confused about. It's
Hmm?
and then
Yeah.
ITS and then IT apostrophe S.
Very good. What's the difference?
The first one is
This
possessive.
one is possessive.
The first one is possessive.
Good.
The last one is short.
Some of you are hedging. You say one is possessive, one isn't. Oh, answer
The
me.
first one is possessive.
Very good. The second one is a contraction
Yes.
of it
It is.
is. Right. It can also be used as a contraction of it has, but that's more informal.
Is there
It's
one
been-
with apostrophe after the S?
If you have something before that that is plural, let me think. Try to give me an example of this thing.
The adjective was but not this kind.
I don't know, but if there are certain words that, let's say, ends with S, but sometimes when you want to put it in the...
Yeah, let's come away from this one because I can't think of any example where that would be.
So let's say
Correct.
if you are writing about Jesus
Mhm.
or something,
Mhm.
yes. Is it it? So
Yeah.
Jesus is...
Because this is possessive here,
Yes.
right? If you do this, that means you have more than one Jesus,
Yeah.
right? I'll keep thinking of this one. So this would be like a plural form for something.
Yes.
Sorry, possessive of something that's plural.
Okay.
But this is possessive here, but it is singular. So it doesn't make sense for this to be here. If you need to do possessive, it will be this one. I can't think. What I'll do is I'll try to do a search and see if I can find an example of that in a sentence, but nothing is coming. If you need to possess something, you would use this top one. Yeah?
But so I'm trying to form a sentence here with a possessive one. So
Mhm.
say English is an official language in many countries, but its usage.
Mhm.
So in this
Talk.
sense, it would be ITS.
Yes.
Okay. I always made it IT, and
Mm.
I stopped there.
IT?
Yes.
No, that's
like
never
it.
right.
So I had a couple of compliments in most of my writings, which should change this, and I always got confused.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So it isn't anything, it's not possessive at all, it's just it, right? So, yeah. So any questions you have, you can feel free to ask. This is the time. Don't feel shy at all because later when you're writing, right? Some were very good, not many issues. Some definitely spelling was the issue. Some grammar was the issue. but usually minor things that you will see, you know, time and again. And then the pronunciation thing and the homophones, things that sound alike or sound like something else. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Government agencies and governmental agencies.
Government agencies or governmental agencies. Either one is fine. It depends, you know, you could say these are governmental agencies, these are government agencies. Either one, yeah, it's your choice. Neither one is ungrammatical. Mm-hmm.
But I can also see that I think English now has become more of a universal language.
Mhm.
So you sometimes become very difficult to consider
Mm-hmm.
rules because it's become very international.
Mhm.
It's like universal language.
Mhm.
Rules sometimes it's becoming very difficult. And technology too is really affecting
Mm-hmm.
the use of English words.
Mm-hmm.
And though it may not be right, over a period, it seems to accept the wrong usage of certain words.
Yeah, even so, there are lots of usage-based theories because if people use it for long enough, then it can just become this is a regional dialect of English. So there's Ghanaian English, right? There are things that people would say in Ghana that no one else in the world says, and people don't realize that until they travel and they try to say it, and the eyes glaze over and they don't know what you're saying. But then even things that are considered, so you have a standard orthography, a standard writing system, but that too can be influenced by what people are actually saying, right? So there's something like y'all, right? It's you all, and you're controlling it down to y'all. Now, at a certain point, people say that's not correct, that's not right English, but then that can come into the language and be standardized to the point there's a right way to write y'all. So that would be this.
And besides,
Right? So how can you have a standard way of something that's quote unquote wrong? Right?
and besides, the rules of consistency
Mm-hmm.
is also beginning to affect the language.
Mhm.
For instance, in Ghana,
Mhm.
there are certain words which is RE, center, or center,
Mm-hmm.
and over a period, you find a mixed up
Yeah.
where people are writing ER instead of RE.
This one I saw here too. So ER is correct for US English. RE is correct for UK English. ER is correct in US English. It wasn't until I came here until I saw the RE. And there's a lot of historical things that are going in. The RE is because the British people were subject to French people who taught them how to read and write. So they've retained a lot of the French spellings, right? The Norman invasion, all these things. I don't know if you've heard of these things. But, you know, once they kicked the French out, they still had all of these different conventions. So like when you see like OU, that's coming from French, like labor, right? Or color or any of those things. All this is because the British were colonized by the French, you know, for hundreds of years. Now, when the US was able to get out from under the British, they decided to change all of these things, right, to that. So what you're seeing is because people are seeing this thing, they're like, let me write it that way. Now, this isn't so much of a problem until it starts getting mixed up. So like if you're submitting to a journal, sometimes you'll see, you know, we accept either US spelling or UK spelling, but just be consistent. Right? So the US spelling isn't incorrect, the UK spelling isn't incorrect, but just be consistent. Eventually we may get a Ghana spelling will be accepted.
That is Mantis, right?
Alright. If you have enough people who do something, then it just becomes, this is how Ghanaians do it. So you'll see this. This is
I'm fine.
this is pronunciation again, because this is what is being said, but this is what's being heard. So I'm fine, but people say I'm fine.
And that's where the people is coming from.
The pronunciation.
That's
What's a
yeah,
corruption?
taught by those Ghanaians.
You know, as linguists, we're not supposed to use terms like corruption. It's a spelling that's based on pronunciation. So you have audition, you have pronunciation, all these things interacting. So I'm fine, but you'll see so many people. And again, it wasn't until I came to Ghana before I saw people doing this. And at first you'll start telling somebody, but then you realize everybody is doing it. So if I stop to tell every single person, now in the class I will do it. But if I stop to tell every single person who's writing me a text message or whatever message saying I'm fine, that's all I will spend my day doing. And I have more important things to do with my time, believe it or not.
No, there is something that confuses me a lot, especially in some readings. I try to, this statement, you and me and you and I, some say you and I is an incorrect statement that we should make, and then the correct is you and me. So I get confused, especially, I don't know.
It depends on what is going around it. So if you can take away the you and, right, just pretend like the you and isn't there, and then just leave the I, does the rest of it make sense? Right? Where is it in the subject position where the rest of it will make sense here, then it's fine. The you and me, where is it occurring in the sentence? If you take away the you and me makes sense in that position, then it's correct in that, sense.
It's like you and I were not there. So you were not there is correct. But you can't say you and me were not there because you can't say me were not there.
Exactly. Right? So there's also what's called hypercorrection. So people hear you and I and it sounds more formal, it sounds more British or whatever. So then they start using you and I everywhere, right? But this is what it is. Where is it? Is it occurring as an object in a sentence? Is it occurring as a subject in a sense? Take away the you and that will instruct you on which one to use. Yeah.
Everybody, everyone. And which is the more formal one to use?
It depends on context, but generally everyone. Right? Yeah. Do you have a sentence that you want to?
No, but I think it has to do with historical. Because I think Americans wouldn't say everybody. No, I think Americans would say everybody, but in British, the word is like everyone.
No, US is both. Yeah, everybody is fine, everyone is fine. But again, it depends on context. Everyone would be something that you would see like in an academic paper. You really wouldn't see everybody in an academic paper. If you're just saying, hey, everybody, let's go, right? And usually it's like, I'm here, the rest is here, I'm speaking to a crowd. Hey, everybody here is wearing blue. You could also say everyone here is wearing blue and nobody would raise a red flag. But, generally if you're writing something down, you wouldn't say everybody in the town or everybody, you say everyone. And then this is the thing, so we're talking about native speakers, and usually native speakers have better intuitions, but I was here doing my PhD, and my supervisor was a non-native speaker of English, but he was correcting my English. So at a certain point it just gets to, all right, how much have you studied it and this thing? And usually he was taking away things that were coming from the US that I just regarded as fine, like the example, in regards to, I've always said in regards to, that's what everyone says. But then he's like, no, use with regard to. I was like, okay. So ever since then in my writing, he's not supervising me anymore, but I still use with regard to. And it makes me, like, when you hear things that sound this way, for like a US speaker, it sounds like someone British wearing like a tuxedo. And with regard to the things, it's like a butler or something, I don't know. So, yeah, these are the things that even if it's someone who's a non-native speaker, if they, are very familiar with the conventions and these things, they can be correcting you and you're a native speaker. If, you can say, all right, my native language is Chi, but you can have someone who's not a native speaker who knows the words, the spellings, and all those things. So sometimes it just helps to be open. This is part of the thing with peer review, because this is what's going on. Someone is going to look at what you're doing, what you're saying, and sometimes they'll give you advice. Sometimes it's clear cut, you better take that advice. Other times it's just a matter of, usage or choice or things like that, or context, right? So just kind of try to be open to some of these things. Are we okay? All right. So today's seminar, Brem, Aba, Emma, hey, you doing that sounds. Anyway. Syrians will come. Yeah, so today's seminar, any thoughts, ideas, reflections? You look like you want to say, but you're not. Okay. So he was going too fast for you to really catch the flow of everything. Yeah, so sometimes this comes up if you have a short period of time. I'm going to try to fit as much in, but sometimes it's cost-benefit analysis. You end up having diminishing returns. I've said everything, but who understood what I said? So this is the one of the big things about visual aids, amongst other things. So if someone is just reading it, if you don't hear it, you're lost. But if you have perhaps a PowerPoint or a video or something else, then they can always refer back to your points. Oh, so I missed that part, but I had the prompt here, so I got the overall look and I can link it back in. So this is again just in terms of best practices. In these days and times, just about everyone who does a presentation, or let me not say it like that. When you all do your presentations, try to have visual aids, whether it's a printout or a PowerPoint, try to have visual aids for yourself, and it will help those who are listening. It can also help you as you're going through, right? So out of what you did here, or was everything just lost? If so, these will be very interesting summaries that I will be reading. The presenter spoke, period, or full stop.
We get some of the information, but it doesn't follow as you were saying.
Yeah.
So you say one thing here, and then the next one you are somewhere. So it doesn't give chronological events for the reader to actually understand what you want to put across.
Yeah, so that's a very similar point. And again, all I can say is that it's not so much to critique the presenter, it's thinking that anytime you see something that you don't think is perhaps the best practice, think about it for yourself, not so much, because you're not going to go and tell Dr. Nteus who you didn't do it. Think about for yourself, how can I do better? If you really have an issue, think about how you can improve yourself in reference to that issue. And this was something that even came up. We were having MA, MPhil presentations, and a lot of the students didn't have any type of visual aid. They were just, kind of going. And that was one of the critiques of the students, right? So even as me as a research fellow, if I hear everyone critiquing the students about that, I should take some of that and use it as advice for myself. You understand? So if you're hearing this from your colleagues, think about it for when I do a presentation, what will I do? Right? It will help the listeners, it will help you. For those who got anything or understood anything, what did you get? I'll say that I had the same issue, right? I didn't come early, so that was even part of the issue. So I was thinking, oh, you know, it's hard for me to catch the train of thought. But if everyone else is having issues catching the train of thought, because you know, if you miss the beginning, that's giving you a lot of the context. So you just have to try to, you know, get what you get. And you know, some of the things that he was saying, I was like, okay, yeah, like a point or two. But even still, it would be very difficult to try to narrate it. And usually it's people who are in their, you know, old age who take a conference paper and then just come and read their paper. Understand? It's not perhaps the most engaging type of strategy. So there are other things that you can do if you know, want to have, let's say, maximum impact and maximum effect and maximum understanding. Content.
At the beginning, I recall he was talking about the background of the priest and his father, his mother, and the relationship between the Gonjas and the Nauri people. And he mentioned that among the Nauri people, there was a prestige to be a hunter. So the Nana Muni's family practiced that profession. And so even as he grew up, he began with trading. And he traded the task his father got from the elephant he hunted from. But due to certain events that happened during his time about the British War and the Ashanti War, the trade was interrupted. So there was no longer any market at Saranga. So Nana Muni has to now follow his father with his practice. So he also became a hunter, got initiated into the practice. And he spoke about how he became a priest as one old woman went looking for sticks and got possessed by a spirit. And the spirit told her what to do. So she came to tell her family. They went back to the place and they tried to put in place some of the things the spirit had told the woman. So they realized it was powerful. But before it was just responsible for protection of the people. So now the people moved from their area to go and live by the shrine. And there they had also acquired other deities, making the shrine more potent. So the other deities are responsible for war, agriculture, and healing. Agricultural production, reproduction, and healing. So and he had mentioned how who can become a priest for the shrine of the Kempe shrine. And said the oldest male was the one who was supposed to become the priest. But during the Namuni's time, there was another person belonging to the other family, the Mensa family, who was supposed to have, it was called Alecho. But Nana Muni, due to certain reasons, brother became the priest. And he mentioned he was supported by the British and the Gonja people. And because the British had an interest, if Nana Muni should rather become the priest than Alich, because Nana Muni belonged to the Nauri ethnicity, and they were just they were not really seen as a full community, like let's say you mentioned Gonja and some other communities, but they're now becoming just like some sub communities, made it difficult for the British to really centralize.
They were centralized.
So we were much more interested in also gaining authority over those other, should we say, decentralized areas. So if Nana Muni would become the priest, then he will have a way to get to control all the other sub communities. And he said because Anamuni also had the mother being a Goja, so he was also much more quite a little biased when it comes to that sense, though he was a Namuni. So
he was torn between the two communities.
Two fires.
So I think he contradicted the succession process and then the casualty. He wasn't the right person to write because of that, the willingness of the Union of the to do through the chiefs. So they wanted to do that through centralized chiefs. And this man was the one who could. So they have to change the succession, I don't know, the process so that he can get the people to come under his control so that the movement could move. I think that was what
He was ambitious because he actually stole the things that that was supposed to
The bag and the hat
yes.
and yeah.
And he mentioned some legacies that he left, and for the negative legacies he said he established a precedent for which anyone could take the precedent because he actually stole the things. People could now do any other thing to become chiefs, and then he undermined the rotational succession, and then he became an instrument for British and Goja to use to rule the people. And for the positive legacies, he supported intermarriages, and he was key in the introduction of Western education in the Nile community. And he also formed a female court called the Opinion
Okay, very good. So now overall, the so what question, how does it relate, how is it relevant, how is it relative to anything? Why is it important?
I think that the questions that were raised after his presentation drew my attention to this thing because some people managed to link it to the current situation in respect to chieftains.
Yeah.
And so they asked him, so looking at this history, how do you think it can affect the history, respect to the quarrels in chieftains, and how do you think you can help out? And then he himself alluded to the fact that he foresee a problem. So then I really put up my hands to ask them, what measures are you taking to curtail this problem if it comes up? Because you having the power of this history makes it really good for you to correct some of these things. But then again, this is a traditional society, and I don't know much about them, but the statistics say state that the northern part of Ghana, most of them are not literate. I don't know how to read this, but comparing to other regions, you can say that they are not much educated. So if he has to talk to them, then it has to be come down to their level and then use his writings to explain certain things to them to curtail these chieftain's issues. So that's all I think about the bigger question.
Yeah. So these are things like in your presentation you may want to make those clear. So it shouldn't be okay. Or let me say it doesn't have to be that someone asks a question and like, so how does this relate, to this? How is it relevant? That you could foresee some of those things and say, this is why it's important in the broader view. These are things that are still going on. Succession, those types of things. These are the implications. These are the future directions, and we'll actually talk about some of these things today.
And I think in line to that one, the most important thing is just that the problem that Nana Amani created was corrected immediately after his death. That he subverted the procedure, and as soon as it happened, the family that subverted it identified the rightful people and handed over the this thing, and I believe that we can learn from it. Most of the problems we are having with our chieftaincy issue, let's go back to where it started, corrected the homeborn and lepers.
Some people are not ready to move on. There's a similar thing in Secondly. There's Secondly.
This was
Secondly
let's
compound. They
learn
don't have.
from these people.
They don't have chiefs.
It's a positive thing. Let's learn
Several,
from
you
them.
know, it's chieftaincy issues are such that I don't know. Maybe now politics have also played a role, but it's been made such that the two sides are not ready to agree. And so presently in Secondly, they don't have any chief. It is country that has a chief. That is British Secondly, but that Secondly don't have it.
I also want to.
Please come.
The fact of the issue is that immediately after the post-colonial those who really got into ascend to the throne educated their people and they wrote the history to in their favor. And those who were the rightful owners of the succession were educated and there's a kind of intellectual conflict between them. The history has been tilted to
Dishonesty.
decide and it's a country of the rightful owners of the succession. And in an attempt to correct it, that has led to the numerous conflict that we shows that the colonial has changed the succession rules in the northern
Not only in the northern region. So if you speak to Dr. Nidote, he will say the same thing about the Ga and others who have this exact same issue. But please,
talking to the
yeah.
and the other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So, in order to curtail that, then the history should be limited. And then the educated don't want to do that because when they do that, somehow now become powerful because of that, and they want to lose their status.
Yeah.
So that is the political parties have also told the line to amass votes. They have also followed the colonial policies where they were moving to the chiefs. So you see the chiefs aligning with the parties and then the system has, and their policies are when I come to power, I want to do this, I will send you
A road here,
so
light there.
a complex thing that
Yeah.
it will take some years, and I don't think it will be an ending conflict.
It's a thing that actually came up as well. I mentioned definitely that there are other areas in Ghana and elsewhere where you have very similar things going on, where you have these ones who were put in place intentionally to, do certain things, and then now you have people who are trying to go back to what the actual thing was. So, like you're saying, these are very complex things, especially when those who are in power now are saying, let's align with others who are in power, political parties, these things to help to now legitimize. These are things that are going on, even like, for example, very, very old conflicts. So Equapim, you have Akans, you have Guans, you have at Ebri. This is now the Oman Hene of Equapim South. Equapim South is a district, a modern day district. So how can you're combining two things, a traditional system, and I'm saying I'm the Oman Hene of this new creation of, the modern day government. How can you have an Oman Hene? But a lot of these things are rooted in things that are going back to the Achims, to the Akwamus, to, all these old things trying to reassert, these powers and other things. So this actually came up in Prof. Akosia Pebi did a lecture, and she deals with, if you're not aware, indigenous enslavement, right? And she was talking about, she gave a presentation somewhere, and someone said, oh, this case you are mentioning, that's my great-grandfather. So they knew. So, even she gets some way about even mentioning the name, she just tries to give general things, because these are things that if you say the wrong thing, the person will sue you. You're just doing your academic thing, but no, that's not the right thing. What you're saying, So even the way you're writing it is going to support some and, disenfranchise others. And this comes up to the piece about getting close to the end, objectivity. And I found it very interesting what Dr. Ntilus, who said that anytime he wants to view things from the side of his enemy, and I was going to ask, but I, decided not to. Are you being objective if every single time you're biased towards your enemy's point of view? That's an actual question. So are you being objective if you are always taking the side of your enemy?
No. There should be a defining principle
Yeah.
upon which your decision should be based.
Right.
And so, with that principle, I may be for you today, and I'll be against you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
If you are moving away from the principle.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, the system where you want to choose to be in agreement with the opposing person all the time means
Mhm.
that you are getting to kind of, Dr. Kavi says, lose-win relationship
Mm.
where, okay, you're saying that, yes, at the end of it, some people are going to suffer after you,
Mm.
you have left. So
Mm.
the question is, be on principle.
Yeah.
If no. If this yes,
Mm.
yes.
This is how I wanted that to come out. Like if I would have, when I was thinking about the question, this is the point that I was thinking, that it should not be I'm always on the side of myself. It shouldn't be I'm always on the side of my enemy. It should be there has to be some guiding principle. What's truth? What's right? What is, there should be higher principles that if I am in the wrong, then I need to go to that side. If my quote unquote enemy or opponent, or however we want to phrase it, is in the wrong, then I should stand on the principle and try to bring them to the right side. If you have a case of someone who is always against themselves or people who look like themselves, then you get to the point of, what we're talking about in the conflict. These people who are aligned with the British or aligned with the Germans that's actually been a problem for African people, that you had people who, because they could get financial benefits or whatever benefits, they're always allying against other African people. So a lot of our problems come from having people who are saying, no matter what, I'm going to fight against African people, right? But then how do you prevent them from doing that, right? When there's plenty of money in it, when there's plenty of position in it, you can get a chieftaincy, you can get power, you can get land, if you always fight against African people. So again, this should be problematized. If we're really talking about objectivity, it's very subjective to say on any case I'm always going to ally with the Germans or the British or the Dutch or the whatever. I'll never align with any African. If there's some type of guiding principle, then all right, perhaps, and this actually came up, we were talking about India, and I was just recently reading a lot on India for obvious reasons. But you had India moving towards independence, and you had the Dalit people. These are the untouchable people, the black untouchables of India. Now, you had one side that was going for independence from British rule, right? And in this, they were trying to keep all Indians together, but you have the Dalit people who are always oppressed, burned alive, mutilated, degraded, raped, every type of atrocity you can imagine is what the Hindu people are doing to the Dalit people. So the Dalit people are saying, freedom, you're saying we're going for freedom and independence. Freedom for who? You understand? Because, if we just say this is a big, large thing, let's go for freedom, these people who are here are like, once these folks go, who is going to keep you off of us? And the end result over time has been massacre after massacre after massacre after massacre of the Dalit people. In 2014, there were 47,000 cases of rapes, murders, dismemberment of these people. 47,000 cases. Oh, this is in India.
No, when?
2014. 2014. So of that, some thousands were rapes, some thousands were murders, some were dismemberment, and then other things. So it gets to be somehow complex if you're saying, well, these people are fighting against the British, therefore they're good. And then the Dalits who are saying, no, we need some type of safeguards, constitutional safeguards, political safeguards, voting, we need our own voting block, we need our own representation, because they're saying it sounds like a high, lofty ideal to say independence and freedom, but if at the end of the day I'm going to be even more oppressed and I don't have any recourse, then what's really going on? So again, we have to look at the whole thing. If we just say all the time we're going to say against the British, well, what about these people who once the British go, it's going to be a wholesale slaughter? I hope you're following. Not to say by any means I would be for the British, but these are things that we have to think about in our analysis. Do you have or any other thoughts?
I don't know, I was thinking that today's presentation also takes a lot of courage. Because it's scientific, something scientific, but it's still involved his life. His wife. It's a family affair.
Yeah.
So the question they asked, I was foreseeing that question. And I was hoping to see how he is going to answer. So I don't know, I'm trying to think that how else could that question be answered?
Yeah. So that,
Can you imagine that?
yeah. It came up in a way asking, well, how can you be objective if you're a part of it?
It's a big,
And then the answer was somehow problematic to say I'm always going to take the side of my enemy. And I'm not sure if it is really meant in that way, but if that's always, if you say this is my default setting, I'm going to view it from the side of my enemy. Well, what happens when that one gets out of balance to the point that it's detrimental to yourself, detrimental to your people, detrimental to others? Again, I think if we're guided by higher principles, what's correct, what's true, what's right, then we can avoid saying I'm always going to be on my own side just because I'm me. Or to say I'm always going to be on my enemy's side just because that's my enemy. And then, we could start saying once we are guided by truth and righteousness, then the objectivity grows from that naturally, as opposed to say, if I'm always going to be on my enemy's side, then therefore that is the definition of objectivity. That may not be objective, that's being biased, but it's hurtful to yourself. And you actually have people who do things that are hurtful to themselves. They call it sadomasochistic. And these are people who get kicks out of like cutting themselves with razors, flogging flogging, all these types of things. There are people who actually do this in various aspects of their lives. They do things that are harmful to themselves, drugs, drinking. You would call it subtle suicide, right? So you wouldn't say this person is objective who is always hurting themselves. No, you're very subjectively hurting yourself. But if you're going to be objective, then you start saying, well, should I be doing this to myself? Even saying it harms myself, that's not saying this being objective per se. All right. Okay. I think just for time's sake, let's move to what our topic is today, constructing a research paper part 2. So today we're dealing with creating a research space. Creating a research space. Now, you see these links. What I realized last week is that I was giving you all links that are far too long. So I made these shortened links that do the same thing, but they will point you towards where the actual longer link is. So if you type these down, or write these down rather, they will give you everything that we're going to cover for the most part today. So creating a research space. So basically we're dealing with this in terms of introductions. We're looking at how to get started writing. Now for many people, this is the most difficult part. Where do I get started? How do I, deal with what I'm supposed to be dealing with? And this is a model for introductions, and it's based on a study of articles by John Swales across a range of disciplines. So looking at both sciences, humanities, social sciences, so forth and so on. And according to the research, writers frequently use 3 rhetorical moves to create a context for their work. And this is alluding to what we were discussing last week, just in terms of, where is the niche, where is the gap. We were talking about literature review. We're talking about literature review and trying to carve out a niche, trying to carve out, this is why this is important, this is why it needs to be done, this is the gap that exists, in the research as it stands. So these moves can happen both in the introduction of the piece as well as on a larger scale throughout the paper, proposal, or document. So again, the model in terms of these moves, and we'll explain what these moves are, they attempt to explain and describe the organizational pattern of writing, the introduction to scholarly research articles, right? Now the model is helpful because one, it helps you begin the writing process, is what we're saying. Oftentimes this is very difficult. You say, where do I start? I don't even know what my topic should be. This can help you with the topic. Once you identify the topic, this again can help you, carve out, well, what original contribution are you going to make by addressing this topic. Also understanding the way in which an introduction sets the stage for the rest of your paper, right? So sometimes you'll send a paper out and it will be to a very general journal, and you realize that people at that journal may not know anything about Kangpe Shrine, or what a Nawari is, or what a Gonja is, or any of those things. So, if you're writing for somewhere in Ghana, it may be okay, but even still, you would need to give some type of introduction, right? Depending on how general or how specific the journal or publication is, that will in large part tell you how specific your introduction needs to be. And, in part of it is identifying your audience. Would my audience know anything that I'm talking about? If they do, then we can make certain assumptions and move forward, right? If I'm writing to a Ghanaian journal, I don't have to explain Ghana is a country in West Africa. we all live here, we know. But if you're sending it somewhere else, then those things may need to come in. All right? Also helps you assess how the introduction fits within the larger scope of your study. And again, we briefly talked about scope. Can I deal with every single person in Ghana, or in Africa, or in the entire African world? If not, then you are going to have to make some decisions, some very selective decisions. How are you going to make those decisions? This is going to be part of your methodology, right? Randomly, specifically, purposefully. And the model assumes that writers follow a general organizational pattern in response to two types of challenges or competitions relating to establishing a presence within a particular domain of research. So basically, it's like you're coming into a room and you are trying to find a position, you're trying to find a seat, right? So you're going to establish, this is going to be my position, this is going to be me occupying this position, this is what I'm going to do while I'm here, right? It's a similar analogy that you take when you're entering the field, right? Field of study, that is. How am I going to establish myself in this field? And even to say field is just an analogy. So picture a field of corn, picture a field of grass. This is an area, a space. We're making an analogy with space. How do you go onto that field and say, this is my space in the field? This 1 foot by 1 foot, this is where I'm going to occupy, right? Well, what if someone is already standing there, right? How do you make a case that you should be standing there and not this person? Or how do you say, well, this person is standing is fine, I'm going to stand beside them? Or I'm going to stand opposite to them, because where they're standing is the wrong position? I hope you're following the analogy. So when we say field, we think about it like an abstract thing, but really that's an analogy for something that's very physical that we can think about. So if we can think about where the original analogy comes from, it can help us to understand how we carve out a niche in this field, right? So one, you could deal with the competition to create a rhetorical space, right? So you may be trying to fill this spot in the field and someone else will say, no, that is my plot. I want to plant corn here. No, I'm going to do banche here at this place. No, I want Baire. Right? How are you going to determine that this area of the field is going to be used for this purpose? And this is the best way that this area of the field can be utilized? I hope you're following. Otherwise, we'll go away from the analogy. I don't want to confuse you more instead of helping you understand. Also, two, the competition to attract readers into that space, right? So now you come to how are you going to sell your corn? You have the best corn, right? Has it been taken care of well? Are there bugs on your corn? right? How are you going to attract readers into this space as opposed to someone else who's trying to attract them to that space? Sometimes it can be complementary, other times it can be competitive, right? Very good. The model proposes 3 actions. Swells calls them moves, accompanied by specific steps that reflect the development of an effective introduction for a research paper. So we'll talk about these moves, and the moves or steps can be used as a template, right? So it's just general things that you may try to do, and it's not rigid. It actually gives you different ideas of when you're first coming into the space, you can do this, you can do this, you can do that. So let's look at it. So again, this can be used as a guide for your own writing. It can also be something that you can help someone else with their writing. Right? How are you going to fill your space? Right? This is what I'm doing right now. Right? I have my own writing. Now, how am I going to assist others who are going to come into a field and fill this space? So, move 1. This needs to be in your notes. Establishing a territory. This is a situation. So step 1, under move 1, now there are 3 moves, and under each move there's a specific step. 1, claiming importance, centrality, right? Now this is even foreshadowing that so what question, right? So I'm saying, okay, you went to the shrine, who cares? What does that have to do with anything in the world? You start off by saying this is important because so and so and so and so, right? So you start foreseeing those questions that come at the end, even before you get started, or the centrality of this research that I'll be doing. Step 2, make topic generalizations, right? So based on the shrine, this is what's going on the shrine, and this is, some general ideas that I'm going to draw, right? And in this, you can start going towards universals in answering that type of question. This helps us understand succession in other places in Ghana, right? Because what my findings will be, or what I'll be researching into, is going to be something that I can have generalizations that come from, or it's even relevant for the modern political sphere, right? If we have a president who's been on seat for 40 years, then the way this person relinquished their power, perhaps there are lessons to be gleaned from that, even in the modern day political sphere. This person has been president for 30, 40, 50 years. How are they thinking about transitioning back to some other form or towards something for the future? Also reviewing items of previous research, right? So, whether it's, again, this was talked about, you can look at oral sources of data, archives, written sources, other things, right? So all of these things, what was done previously, either by researchers like myself, or by people who are archiving data, or for those who are remembering stories, all of these are sources, right? Also written sources, especially when you're dealing with African societies that had very robust systems of writing. Oftentimes when we think about Africa, we think African people didn't have writing, but again, last class we talked about these various writing systems. So now if we're doing a comparative analysis, these ancient writing systems are sources for data, right? Let's continue. Move 1, establishing the territory. This is generally accomplished in 2 ways. By demonstrating that a general area of research is important, critical, interesting, problematic, relevant, engaging, right? Remember we talked about the 3 R's? How does it relate to anything? How is it relevant to anything? How is it relative to anything else, right? These are things that you want to deal with right from the beginning. And then you come to why is it otherwise worthy of investigation, and by introducing and reviewing key sources of prior research, right? This is now getting into what we were talking about, literature review, to show where gaps exist. Remember, this is a key point, or where prior research has been inadequate in addressing the research problem, right? You can say, according to this person, and this person, this is the issue, However, and then you go into this and we'll actually look at how you can use some of these terms. And those terms will cue that I'm establishing my own niche from the beginning. And all of this will help your academic. I told you I was bringing that on you every so often. I'm seeing who's paying attention. Because all that we're doing is very academic. Okay. Oh, so from last week, did everyone get the slides?
Yes, I received it.
You received it?
And then sent one copy to them. But the other one, it's like I'm finding it difficult to download.
Which one is that?
So that's,
The one we got was the article.
yes, is it the Anansi?
Okay, you weren't able to download the article.
That's what you have.
So that's the slides.
You have the article, but you don't have the slides. The slides are about 40 megabytes, so it's relatively big for an email, but you should still be able to download it. So I think it's attached as a Google Drive link. So when you click on it, then you'll ask for permissions, and I'll allow you to do that. Anytime it's something, I think over 20 or 25 megabytes, they make it be attached as a link instead of directly in the email. But it's still there. When you click on it, you ask for permissions, and I'll click the button. You have access. Then also, yesterday I sent the video. Now in the video, the slides are embedded in the video itself. So look for that. You can send that to everyone if you didn't already. And this is one to help this class so that you can go back over any information. The slides are embedded in the video, and then also for future classes. So like if you can already prepare for the class before you even come, then we can deal with much more engaging discussions as opposed to, let me just introduce the information, right? Let's continue. So in establishing your territory in move 1, there are 3 steps for this. And this is what we were mentioning before. We'll try to go into a little bit more in depth. So as you're claiming importance of the writing action, describing research problem, describing the research problem, providing evidence to support why the topic is important to study. Right, so again, all of these things are going to be foreshadowing the so what question, right? You shouldn't per se wait until the end and now people are saying, you gave us all this data, you gave us all this information, why do I care? And again, that's not a mean question. I just don't understand why it's relevant to anything, right? How does it help the field of African studies? How does it help our social relations on a day-to-day basis? I don't understand, right? So to even foreshadow that. Again, when we're talking about making topic generalizations, the writing action, so we're talking about more abstractly, these are the specific actions that you should do in your writing. You should start providing statements, very clear statements of the current state of knowledge, right? So this is part of what you're getting from your literature review. This is what everyone in the world knows about this topic so far. And you're giving your statement, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. What the consensus is, everyone in the field says this. I disagree. That's you setting up your niche right there from the beginning. What is the practice or description of the phenomena? So this is a practice, everyone is doing this, right? Or this is what the phenomena is, right? This is the general understanding. And then in terms of reviewing items of previous research, the action that goes along with that is you start to synthesize prior research, right? To come out with these ideas. To further support the need to study the research problem, right? Because we've only gotten up to this point, this is now you substantiating the things that you've said up to this point. So at this point, this isn't per se a literature review, but more a reflection of key studies that I've touched upon, but perhaps not fully addressed the topic. So this is where you're saying these are the shortcomings. This is what I'm going to do to address those shortcomings. So again, what you can ask yourself is, why is my research important in this moment, in this current moment of 2016, politically, socially, historically, right? So again, how can you answer the question for anyone else if you haven't asked yourself the question to start with? Right? Does it make sense? Very good. Also, an example phrase of this: in recent years, researchers have become increasingly interested in this. So you're saying everyone goes down this path, right? So are you going to now say, but I think we should go down this path? Or you could say everyone went down this path walking. I think we should run. So now this is a question of method. I think we should go all hopping on one foot. This is what I will, do. So either you'll say the path itself needs to be reevaluated, or the way in which people went down there. Everyone walked. I think we should drive. Everyone drove, but that is polluting the atmosphere. I think we should walk. Right? Somehow you have to add some type of new dimension to what's been done. If you say everyone walks down the path, I'm walking down again. Why? Who cares? Why do you need to walk down? It was already walked down in the correct way, right? And documented. We did video. We had it on our phones. We were doing live streaming of it. Why do you need to repeat what was already done? Also, many recent studies have focused on, so these are actually things that you can put in your notes, because these are devices that you can use, actual real life expressions that you can use. This is what has been done, and now that opens the door for what you're going to do that's going to be different. Let's continue. So in this, again, you can't read every single book that has ever been written. Or can anyone do that? Is anyone able to do that? Read every single book that's ever been written? From Hard to Deaf on. If not, you will start to have to selectively synthesize and review previous work in a literature review, right? So you will have to be selective. Everyone is being selective. There's no concept of total objectivity. Just in deciding what you will read is making a subjective decision. This is why I think these works are more important than the other 1.2 billion books that are out there, right? And this is something that comes up oftentimes, especially in terms of African-centered research, is this idea of previous scholars, or there may be specific schools that are very Eurocentric, right? There's a certain type of hegemony of knowledge. When you're making your selection, are you going to say the only thing that's relevant or relative or whatever is going to be what's written by European scholars, right? Now, again, you can make the point, all right, whatever, I'm going to take the point of view of someone who doesn't look like me, so I will only go to the European scholars. But that can be very problematic, obviously, right? Then by the same token, you say, just regardless of anything else, I'm only going to look at African scholars. That could also have issues, right? But if you're saying, I think these are the most important because I think these are the most truthful, on what basis? So all of those types of decisions of what books are you going to read, all those things are subjective, right? So sometimes we can even kind of trick ourselves into thinking I'm perfectly objective. But even to say I'm going to study something that comes from my own ethnic group, right? That's very subjective, right? And again, this is what we were talking about last week, that this is one of the challenges that our past Kwame Nkrumah chair said, that if you have someone who's from Kwewu, they do Kwewu roads and transportation. If you have someone who's Ga, they do Nungwa priests. If you have some, you understand? Everyone is doing, I'm going back to my village just because I want kinke. And I'll use my research as an excuse to go and get my grandma's kinke, right? So all of those types of decisions where we can say that we're being entirely and wholly objective, but even what are we going to study is a very subjective decision. Now, if you're going to be as honest as you can be, you start off by saying, it's very subjective for me to go to my own village. It's very and then now you start to mitigate some of the things that come along with that. But if we're not even critical of ourselves enough to recognize that I've made a subjective decision, then we'll think that we're being entirely objective. And now all of the problems that come up from making things, decisions that are subjective, we're not going to do anything to stem those types of things, right? So if I come from Kumasi and all my research is Kumasi research, you understand? There's something going on there. I need to start dealing with how come I'm not going to deal with anything other than Kumasi. What in my background is influencing the fact that I'm only going to deal with Kumasi and how things relate to Kumasi, and anything else I research is just going to come back to all roads lead to Kumasi. You understand? Okay, let's not beat a dead horse. So again, imagine that all past research on your topic is an ongoing academic conversation that you need to understand fully before joining in, right? And this is why I didn't ask my question, because I said I came in late. Perhaps it would have enriched something, but you need to know what's going on. Perhaps if you aren't fully aware of everything that's going on in the conversation, you'll ask a question that was already asked, or the person actually said this specific thing that you're bringing up, and that happens. You have someone who comes in late, and they start off the presentation.
Like that.
Okay.
Like the slave thing. I think the person did not really hear you.
Yeah. Right. So it can be embarrassing, but even beyond being embarrassing, this is what we're talking about here. Just to know fully what's going on, and then once you know what's fully going on, that will even inform what your questions are. Because the question is to fill a gap in you, right? I know everything you said, but you missed this part, so I'm asking a question in order to fill that part, right? But if you aren't aware of what's going on, then, right? So even asking these types of questions of yourself. And then to structure your synthesis, ask yourself, what would X author say to Y author, right? This is getting more advanced in terms of your thinking, right? This is the point of view of this author. They say I'm only going to view things from my own viewpoint, right? As a Dalit. Then this person saying I'm only going to view things from my viewpoint as an upper caste Hindu. Or this person says I'm not Dalit, but I'm only going to view things from the Dalit. You understand? So what would someone who has this viewpoint say about this person? How would they try to critique this person's argument? How would someone from this one try to critique that person's argument? How would either of them critique this person who's on the side and saying, I'm only going to view things from this person's perspective? You understand? So if you can start answering those things, it means that you really are understanding this person's point of view, because I see this is what they take on every single occasion. I see this person's point of view, this is what they take on every single occasion, and so forth. And then ask yourself, does X author extend Y author's research? This one came first. Are you contradicting that research, or are you trying to move it forward? Right? Does this person critique it or whatever? So an example phrase, and again, you can put these types of examples in your notes. Much research has examined this, though different conclusions have been made. So before you can even say much research has examined, then you have to even know. Now, this is the flip side of this, and I've seen this in several presentations here on campus. Someone will just start off by pretending like there's a gap. No one has dealt with this before, and they think that just by making that proclamation that makes it true. It does not. No one in the world has ever dealt with Kangpe Shrine, therefore, but what if you make that proclamation and you don't know that that's what Dr. Ntewusu has written a book on? You understand? You will really be taken to task and upbraided for doing this type of thing. But sometimes in such a rush to try to create this niche, you want to, let me not say you want, I've seen people literally do this thing and say no one has dealt with this. Very little research has dealt with Africa. Really. You understand? So you want to be very careful, very cautious, and very truthful, right? and that doesn't mean to say if much research has examined, that doesn't mean you can't examine it, right? You could just do a review of what's been done. Or, as we were saying, you can say the way it's been done perhaps has not been the best way. So now let me add it from this perspective. So we move on to move 2. Put this in your notes. Establishing a niche. So this action refers to making clear and cogent argument that your particular piece of research is important and possesses value, right? So you've started off by saying this is important because so-and-so, right? You start out by saying this is central and relevant because of such and such. But now you need to follow that up with a very cogent argument of why you are saying that. It doesn't make it so just because you said so. It's important because I come from this village. Really? That's sounding biased already. But even if you do, that doesn't, now what I'm saying, that doesn't mean that you can't research your own village or to say there's anything intrinsically wrong from doing that. But you need to make it very clear that there are generalizations that we can draw. The things that are going on in my village are perhaps universal, or at least they have more import than just what's going on in my village. I hope you're following. So this can be done by indicating a specific gap in previous research, by challenging a broadly accepted assumption, by raising a question, a hypothesis, or need, or by extending previous knowledge in some way, right? So again, just because everyone has done research on your village, you can say, but they haven't dealt with this, or they haven't dealt with it from this angle. Everyone is talking about the socioeconomic impact. I will discuss the political impact, right? And this is some of the intrinsic power of African studies, that we have so many angles from which we can approach this, right? Here's someone who deals with sociology. Here's someone in political science. Here's someone in linguistics. Here's someone in literature. Here's someone in all these different areas, right? So like the story about Eshu with the 2-colored hat, right? So the fight won't break out if you have communication between this one and this one. Oh, it's black. Oh, from my side it looks red. Oh, he's trying to trick us. You understand? Let me hold up a mirror for you. You see? Oh, yeah, I understand what's going on. There's another allegory, and I think it's out of India, China, somewhere, where they talk about blind men touching an elephant. I don't know if you've heard of this one, right? Similar idea. For those who may not be aware, is the idea of if you have blind men who are touching an elephant, this one who's touching the leg says it feels like a tree trunk, right? This one who's touching the trunk says it feels like a rope or something thick vine. This one touching the tail says, oh, it feels like some bushy. The one touching the ear says, oh, it feels like some flesh. Now imagine if they don't have communication, they get into a fist fight. Imagine 3 or 4 blind people trying to hit each other. No, you're wrong. No, what you're saying is wrong. No. Right? And then, why are you deciding to touch the ear? Right? This is a subjective thing. It is based on where your position is. It may be because you have very big ears yourself. So anything that you look at is going to be an ear. But even to address that, addresses your own subjective prejudices. If my ears are big and I choose to only focus on ears, there's something going on here. No matter how much you say objectivity, there's something going on. You're doing elephant ear research here. You're doing rabbit ear research there. Right? You have to explain yourself more than just saying, I'm being objective because I'm going to say something about a nose too. Right? We continue. So establishing a niche. Counterclaiming. Right? Everyone claims this. I'm going to do a counterclaim. Indicating a gap. Everyone has dealt with the historical side. Let me look at the linguistic side. Question raising, right? You can be skeptical, everyone has said this, but I'm skeptical about this thing, right? This person was giving some type of testimony, but the first one doesn't match the second one. The second time they gave the testimony didn't match the third one, and the fourth one didn't match any of those other ones, right? So you're going to start questioning this type of thing with some type of skeptical inquiry analysis. Or continuing a tradition, right? You don't have to be confrontational or competitive with anything. You can say, everyone has done this, let me continue in that line, right? It doesn't have to be confrontational. But even if it is confrontational, that's not necessarily bad. It may push the field forward. So the steps taken to achieve this would be step 1A, counterclaiming, so the writing action there. So again, we've spoken about these things generally, but these are the specific actions that you will be doing in your own writing. Introduce an opposing viewpoint or perspective, or identify a gap in prior research that you believe has weakened or undermined the prevailing argument, right? So everyone, they have Christopher Columbus Day. Everyone says Christopher Columbus discovered America. However, he came to meet millions of people who are there. So can you discover people who are already there? And this is a challenge in scholarship in general, the idea that nothing exists until a white person does it, a European does it, right? So you can even have, and this is what, the critiques about Eurocentricity that have come up, right? It's that, all right, here we have carved in stone a depiction of the world as round. They say it doesn't matter. We're waiting for a white person to do it. And then you wait 1,000 years. A white person has done it. Therefore, it has now been done. You have millions of people, you know that they were there, all documentation. The person who's going to meet those millions of people says that they were there, but they didn't exist until a European came and said, look, I pronounce you existing. Right? So generally, in terms of epistemology, especially Eurocentric epistemology, is that even when you have abundant evidence, something you can look at is the idea that nothing exists until Europeans start doing it. So race doesn't exist until Europeans start dealing with race, right? We can go down the list of every single thing, because that's the hegemony of epistemology. Epistemology is like, what is knowledge? What validates knowledge? You understand? And this is what we find in every single area. And that's what some people have tried to counter. And you even have movements against things like Columbus Day. You understand? The indigenous people in the U.S. mourn that day, right? They don't celebrate it, and they definitely don't say, he discovered me and I'm here. So what's really going on? So let's continue. Yeah?
But with the Euro issue, we found out that there are Europeans also who counter what So how then do you learn the two?
Say again?
Like you said until Europe ceases, then
Yeah.
it doesn't exist. But there are people who also counter what Europe says, like Europeans, for example, Charles Darwin went to some northern part of Argentina and discovered people they couldn't even have language and their lifestyle was something. And another
Right.
European one, they say, no, the guys have a great culture, so and so.
Right.
So, how you can say, do you think that of Darwin or the other guy? Because these are two Europeans.
Right, so now it has to be based on principle, right? So it's not this one or this one. And then even in this is where we're talking about acknowledging subjectivity regardless, right? So this European goes there, Argentina. This other European goes there, Argentina. What are the people of Argentina themselves saying, right? So even to acknowledge that from the outset, both of these are Europeans. So if the only knowledge that exists is what these two Europeans said, that's very problematic still, right? They're arguing amongst each other, but the only thing that is recognized as knowledge is what these two Europeans said. At what point in time do the people from there have their own voice? before we say, all right, well, what do African people say about that? How does it relate to the African people who are taken there and stolen and taken into enslavement? What was their relationship to the indigenous people there when they went there? So all of these are other perspectives. So again, we're talking about the red side of the hat. Even if their argument amongst each other is dark red, is light red, it's still, they're all standing on this side. Now, if they can start to say, I know I'm standing on this side, I know that I'm subjectively, I'm a white person, I'm coming from Europe, these are going to be my biases. That's when you start thinking that they may be moving towards objectivity, but really how far can they move? What language are they writing in? Are they writing in the indigenous people language of the people of Argentina? They may not be. So these are questions that linguists would be asking, right? If all knowledge has to be in English or in Spanish or whatever, that in and of itself is a bias, right? When do we get writings in Quechua, in Mayan, Inca, Olmec, Aztec, whatever? I hope you get the point. So if all the knowledge is coming from Europe, whether or not they're arguing amongst each other, if that's the only knowledge, it's still skewed. Yeah, let's continue. Step 1B, indicating a gap. The writing action is developing the research problem around the gap or understudied area of the literature. I think this is clear, right? I've said there's a gap, I've proven there's a gap, and now this is how I'm going to address that gap. Don't just say that there's a gap if there's no gap. This has happened here at this institute. And and part of it is based on thinking that because I don't know it, no one knows it. Right? Because I haven't studied Gandhi, no one has studied Gandhi. Right? So now you encounter someone who actually has done the research, right? And now you end up trying to hedge. You end up painting yourself into a corner.
But isn't that so because as part of your proposal, you are meant to face the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way you can ignore the problem when there is no problem but you want to do something else?
That has happened. I can give you actual examples of people who have said, that type of thing. So in stating the problem, you have to actually state what it is, right? Which means you have to do the reading, you have to do the research, you have to do all this stuff. You can't just say, no one has ever written on Ghana before. Imagine you can say that that's the problem, no one has ever written on Ghana before. But now you have the entire institute who's going to jump down your throat. You understand?
Yeah,
So.
because I called one of my lecturers discussing my research on
Mm-hmm.
and after talking for a while, he asked me, so, Sarah, what is the problem?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, there is no problem, but I want to write on this. And he says, no.
But you have to know what's going on there.
There should be a problem which you have to address. If not, you are not writing.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay. And then I kept thinking to myself, if there is no problem, why should I create a problem?
I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Now, part of it is just in terms of terminology, right? To say problem, there's lots of conceptual baggage with the idea of problem. Let's say that you are continuing a tradition, which is one of the things that we mentioned earlier, is not necessarily phrased in terms of a problem, but quote unquote, the problem is that it hasn't been continued. I hope you understand it. We've taken it up to the last thing written on it was 1998. What's gone on since 1998? It doesn't have to be confrontational in the sense of quote unquote problem, but the problem is that no one else is still writing on this. But you have to know what the state of affairs is before you can phrase it in any way, shape, or form. So you have to know that no one has written on it since 1998 before you can say that I'm going to continue in that tradition. You have to know that there's a gap, that people have written on the politics, on the health, on the economics, on whatever, but no one has written on the sociological thing. So basically what he's asking you using the terminology of problem is, what are you going to do? And why do you need to do that? The reason why is the quote unquote problem, right? I hope that's clear. It doesn't have to be someone is bleeding. That's the problem. All right. Sometimes it can be a very nice, huggy, whatever. I think they've done a great job. I'm going to continue what they've done, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I want to continue with it.
Mhm.
And assuming you've gotten a problem, there's always a difficulty in situating your objectives to the problem.
Mhm.
How is it easily done?
So give me an example.
Maybe I want to maybe road accident.
Mhm. Road accident.
Maybe accident.
Okay.
Now the road accident.
Mhm.
And I want to go into it. So how will you situate your objectives so that you can easily move on? Is it that you are going to look at the progress that is causing as your objective or addressing it?
This is what we're talking about, just even in terms of using the word problem. It doesn't necessarily have to mean problem in the sense of something that's bad. It means that what makes this necessary and from what angle are you going to approach whatever you write about accidents? You understand? It's a very general thing. When we use the term problem, it makes you think I have to deal with the bad stuff about it. No, sometimes you can deal with the good stuff about it. Now, I won't say road accidents is good stuff, but then you have, like there was a book by Wale Soyinka, I forget the title, but he was dealing with those people who scavenge road accidents. So it's good for them. It's good business for them. Every single time there's an accident, they come and get the parts, they get the iron, they're able to sell it to blacksmiths, whatever. So it's not quote unquote a problem to them. But even to deal with it from that angle, it means that let me come down small. When we're talking about literature review, sometimes that will lead you to what needs to be done. So you just say, generally my topic, I just want to write about it, right? Now, let's say that you read 10 books. As you've gotten to the end of that 10th book, you should start to have an idea of, you'll start to just ask yourself, how come nobody talked about this though? You understand? This is what we're talking about in terms of the problem. The problem is now that nobody talked about this thing, but how would you know that nobody talked about it if you haven't read those 10 books? I hope you're understanding. So sometimes these things just appear to you from going through the literature review, or you'll just get an idea. Sometimes I'll sit in a seminar and I'll just open up my OneNote because something that they said sparked off an idea for an article. Now, I don't even deal with that field, but now, because of what they've said, this made me have an idea. Now I have an idea of a topic. Now that I have this idea, I will go and see what everyone has written on this topic. Once I've seen what everyone has written on this topic, this now gives me what I need to write about because nobody talked about this. Or everyone talked about it. Let me continue what they talked about because the last thing that was written was in the 60s, right? Kwame Nkrumah wrote on neocolonialism. What else have people written? Oh, no one has addressed the neoliberalism problem in Ghana or in my village. Sometimes you can focus on it so far, right? But at a certain point, you still need to come out and say, this is the generalizations that we're going to draw. I'm not just going to my village because I just want to go and sleep in my old room and... All right. So here, question raising. The writing action similar to gap identification. This involves presenting key questions about the consequences of gaps in prior research. That will be addressed by your study. Now you have to read before you can even know that there are gaps, right? And then these are the questions that come. Because no one addressed the sociological aspect of it, this is the implication. People don't know that this is really what's fueling the fire of these chieftaincy issues. This is what's fueling the violence. They just think, oh, it's an NDC, MPP. But some of these things may go back to the 1800s. If you don't understand what's going on, then you will keep thinking, oh, let's just get more votes, or let's just campaign harder. No, what's really underneath these things, right? But you have to know what's going on before you can join the discussion, right? For example, one can state, despite prior observations of voter behavior in local elections in urban Detroit, it remains unclear why do some single mothers choose to avoid so and so and so and so and so, right? Or continuing a tradition is what we're saying before. The writing action there is to extend prior research to expand upon or clarify a research problem. This is often signaled with logical connecting terminology, such as hence, therefore, consequently, thus, or language that indicates a need. Because there's a gap, therefore, I'm going to do this, hence, I will do such and such. For example, one can state, consequently, these factors need to be examined in more detail, right? This is where you're actually starting to deal with what the problem is. Or evidence suggests an interesting correlation. Therefore, it is desirable to survey different respondents, right? We only dealt with women in the community, so they can provide a good perspective, but that's still only one perspective. What about the black side of the hat, right? We only dealt with young people. What about the older people? So these are the questions that will follow naturally from someone who's reading. Now you may be blinded just because you like the topic and you're writing about the topic, but someone else is detached from the topic. They say, well, you didn't do this. You didn't even address this, right? And this is part of what peer review is designed to deal with. So in establishing a niche, this is your rhetorical perspective. Writers show, one, there's some type of gap, shortcoming, or limitation in the existing work. This is what your supervisor or person was saying. Where's the shortcoming? If there's no shortcoming, then why are you writing? Well, I just like the topic. Well, who cares? You need to tell me that there's something going on that's forcing you to need to deal with this type of thing, right? There are social implications. That's why I need to deal with it. No one has dealt with it from this perspective. That's why I need to deal with it. If there's no reason for you to deal with it, then why deal with it, right? But you have to be clear yourself on what those reasons are before you can articulate it to someone else. If someone's asking you, why do you need to deal with it, and you can't articulate, you understand? It's considered to be problematic. That itself is the problem. Or two, that some extension or verification, that should be split, or verification is required. So imagine that you now understand the conversation. So this is the analogy that we gave before. You know, you got into the room, you heard the conversation that was going on. This is a normal thing, right? Let's say you really are coming into a room, you hear people talking. You'll listen for a second to understand what's going on. You don't just automatically come into the room and start hitting someone. You are in the wrong. Pop, 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 pop. If you do that, people will say you're crazy. Right? There's a Ijakpa story. Ijakpa is the tortoise. It's like Anansi. That's what the Yoruba people do. They have Ijakpa tales. And there's one story about Ijakpa and Okere, like this small rodent. So they were best friends. They always did something together. Now, Okere always wanted to, always wanted to get these palm nuts, regardless of whatever happened. So they decide, we need to go to the market, to sell our clay plates and pots and other things so we can get money so we can buy the palm nuts. Now, Ijakpa comes to the market the next day and sees that his friend is in fighting someone else. And before asking any questions, he comes up and starts beating the other one. Hey, why are you beating my friend? Why are you beating my friend? Blah, blah, blah. Now, this other one comes and bites Ijakpa's nose off. And now, after things start to simmer down, they say, your friend went and stole palm nuts. That's why they were fighting, right? Now, if Ijakpa, stood long enough to ask what's going on in the conversation, he would have known. And this, the end of the story is that's why the tortoise's nose, it looks the way it looks, because he got it bitten off because he ran into the thing without understanding what was going on. So now picture yourself as a researcher, you're Ijakpa. You have a choice. You can either come in and understand what's going on, or you can be like Ijakpa and get your nose bitten off when you're giving your presentation, and now Big Prof is saying, you didn't find out what was going on before you came into the discussion, right? So even that story itself is talking about what we're talking about here, right? It's a traditional story, but that itself is a conceptual framework for understanding what we're dealing with here. So the moral of that story is talking about what we're talking about in academia, right? So sometimes we shouldn't just dismiss, it's just some cute whatever. No, this is a profound thing that's being talked about in our traditional oral literature, right? what is the state of affairs before you come into this. Because if you're not dealing with this, this has implications for everything. It can lead to disputes, it can lead to violence, it can lead to deaths, just because you didn't come and see what is the state of affairs. I hope you understand. Let's continue. So imagine that you now understand the conversation and you see some limitation or place where extension is needed. Join the conversation to make the limitation or need for more research clear, right? Now that I understand what's going on, my friend, you're my friend, but you are in the wrong. You shouldn't have stolen those palm nuts or palm fruits or whatever, right? Or no, you were in the right. I realized that so-and-so happened. You were just getting your debt that this one owed, and you were collecting it in palm fruits. So after we adjudicate, no, you had fair right to go and claim what's rightfully yours, your property, right? You have to know what's going on before you can take either side. Now again, going back to objectivity, you shouldn't automatically say, the one who's beating my friend, I'm always going to take their side regardless. That's very biased. Then by the same token, you shouldn't say, just because you're my friend, I'm going to take your side. There should be, as you said, some higher principles. What is true? What is right? Once we do that, now that should determine what side I should take in this whole thing, right? Let's continue. So example phrases for the limitation. However, these studies have failed to recognize the so-and-so and so-and-so, or an extension. This subject has been extensively studied. However, less attention has been paid to, right? So let's say this whole room is filled. We're all looking around the room, but this corner hasn't been studied, right? So I'm not saying let's leave the room, but I'm saying let's turn our attention here. You understand? Or you may say, no, let's leave the room. All of this has been done. Let's come over here and look at the rest of the building, right? Let's get a bird's eye view. Let's get a drone up there taking a photo, right? These are all types of perspectives. Let's continue. Then we come to occupying the niche, the solution. So the final move is to announce the means by which your study will contribute new knowledge or new understanding in contrast to prior research on the topic, right? So when you're talking about graphic design or something else, sometimes you'll come across a PowerPoint where you see there's good contrast. You can read everything here. Imagine if I did all the writing in very, very, very light gray, right? Or white. There's no contrast. It will be very difficult for someone to understand why you're doing something when there's no contrast, right? That's the example. So you need to say, this is what's been done. What's been done, let's make that analogy that that's the background. It's all white. What you're going to do is you're going to put a different color on it. So now you can see the contrast, and now that makes what you are contributing make sense. If there's no contrast, and this is what your person is saying, what's the problem? They're saying, how are you going to contrast with what's there, right? But imagine that you don't know the background is white, right? You haven't looked at any prior research. You don't know what the color is. You say, regardless of what's out there, I'm going to write in white on the thing, right? This is your literature review, is seeing what the background is. So all of these, when we say background, that's an analogy for something like this. This is in the background. So as you're doing your literature review, you're seeing what the background color is. And then based on that, that will determine, am I going to write in black? Am I going to write in red? Am I going to write in green? What has the best contrast with all the background that's out there? I hope it's clear. Good. So the final move announces the means by which your study will contribute new knowledge or new understanding in contrast to prior research on the topic. This is also where you describe the remaining organizational structure of the paper, right? And that's basically dealing with the steps by which you will address these things. So you've carved out your niche, you've identified it, now you're occupying it. So in this, you'll outline your purposes. You'll announce the present research, but you have to know the present research before you can announce it. Announce principal findings. Indicate the research article structure. So let's deal with these more in depth. So the steps taken to achieve this would be: 1, outline your purposes. The writing action is answering the so what question. All right. So again, our former Kwame Nkrumah chair was always pulling his hair out because no one could answer his so what question, or they had never thought of it until he asked the so what question, which is problematic. You know, whether it's a student giving a presentation, a PhD holder giving a presentation, these are things that cut across. So let's say I'm big prof, I'm coming from wherever I'm coming from, and now someone's asking me, so what? And I've never thought about it before. I just thought me merely presenting data, that's the whole thing. Who cares? What else? What else do you want? I've given you data. Let me go home. No, so what? How do I make sense of it? All right? Explain in clear language the objectives of your study. Also, step 1B, announcing present research. The writing action is to describe the purpose of your study in terms of what the research is going to do or accomplish. So in social sciences, the so what question still needs to be addressed. Needs to be addressed. That one is overspeeding. So the 3 steps continued. Step 2, announcing the principal findings. The writing action is to present a brief general summary of key findings written as: the findings indicate a need for, or the research suggests 4 approaches to. All right. Step 3, indicating article structure. The writing action, stating how the remainder of your paper is organized. So here, writers show how their work resolves, or in the case of a proposal, will resolve the gap, shortcoming, or limitation in existing work, or that it successfully extends or verifies past research. Right? So it can either be competitive, confrontational, or no, I'm helping. Right? You shouldn't get locked into only one, and that's the only way you know how to approach this issue. Imagine that you now have everyone's attention, and that you must explain to fellow scholars how your ideas will add or move the conversation forward. Right? So example phrases for the proposal: the purpose of this investigation is to, or to focus my research, I will ask the following questions. Example phrases for any research article or dissertation introduction. The remainder of this paper is divided into 5 sections. Section 1 describes, so especially on a dissertational thesis, this will come. So questions for revision, right? So this is very important, and you'll need to ask yourself these questions. Does the introduction to the piece of writing you are working with, 1, establish the importance of the paper's topic within the discipline? If it doesn't, there's something missing. Does it mention commonly accepted ideas about the topic? Now, the only way you can mention them is to know them. If you don't know them, you can't mention them. That seems obvious, but this is the purpose of your reading. You aren't reading and reviewing literature just for the sake of saying, look, I read 1,000 books. Come pat me on the back. Number 3, discuss previous research related to the topic. Does it do that? Again, you can only discuss it if you know it. 4, does it challenge existing beliefs about the topic? Right? So this is when, after you've discussed what the problem is, you're saying, well, I'm going to challenge what everyone else thinks about this issue. Does it, 5, demonstrate a gap in current research on this topic? And this one for the slides, from last week, what I can do is if anyone has a pen drive, I can give it to any one of you, and then you all can distribute it. Okay. That may be easier than trying to do the link thing and all this. Okay. Ada yare waso. Bisa mi bisa. Hmm?
Oh, you have the slides?
Yeah, I have the slides. That's all right. So questions for revision. Oh, why are people putting down your pens when... So number 6, asking questions about current knowledge in the field. Right? And then naming an area of research that needs to be extended. Explaining the purpose of the paper. Naming the focus of the research. List the primary findings of the research. Or outline the sections of the paper. Right? Now, in addition, a topic outline is a fast and easy way to analyze whether an introduction is effectively organized. According to Perk, Jack, and Bruce, a topic outline can help show the flow of an introduction to ensure it moves from a general introduction of the problem or gap to a specific discussion of the current research, right? So remember, we talked about outlines in terms of the entire paper. You can even have a sub-outline for the introduction to make sure you've dealt with every part that we've discussed here. The topic outline can be combined with the CARS, that's the creating a research space model, to improve your introduction or to offer advice to a peer. So in terms of an exercise, one thing that you can do is with your own paper or a peer's, you can read through the introduction section. Now, this is one thing I always tell people to do. Whenever you are writing anything, read it out loud to yourself, right? And that's better than reading it quietly to yourself, because sometimes your eyes will scan and blah, blah, blah. But when you're having to do an action, this is where you'll catch things that you otherwise would just skip. Usually things like you've written the word "the" twice. When you're just scanning it, you will just go right over it. But then when you're reading out loud, you may catch it, right? Those are sometimes the embarrassing things that can be mitigated. As you read, write down the main points in the introduction in outline form, using short phrases or sentences to describe what you see happening. The outline need not be complex. After creating your outline, read through it to see if each of the moves in the CARS model is covered. Right, move 1, move 2, move 3, then look at the steps underneath each move. Pay particular attention to whether the paper's author, A, mentions how the paper fits into previous research, right? B, lists the paper's main findings, and C, outlines the structure of the paper, right? So, as for myself, I edit a journal. These are some of the things that I would be looking for in someone's paper, right? If it's not doing these things, these are some of the critiques that would come to the forefront. So in the CARS model, Swales, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, showed that establishing a research niche, move 2, is often signaled by specific terminology that expresses a contrasting viewpoint. So once you see, all right, what's the problem? Where's the gap? Why does this need to be continued, whatever you're doing, that you'll use specific language in order to introduce that, or perceived weakness in prior research. The purpose of using these words is to draw a clear distinction between perceived deficiencies in previous studies and the research you are presenting that is intended to help resolve these deficiencies. Below are common words used by authors, right? As they say, you can use contrast, albeit, right? These types of words. Although, so you say so and so and so and so, although such and such, but, howbeit, however, nevertheless, notwithstanding, or unfortunately, right? Everyone did this, but unfortunately this one wasn't covered. Whereas, or yet. So all these types of terms can be very useful in how you're addressing it. You can also use terms of quantity, right? So few scholars have dealt with this. A handful of scholars, less, little, no scholars. Now that's very, right? That's very dangerous. So this is what they call hedging. You may want to use a hedge. So few is less strong than no. But if you use no, you can use that if you are very sure that no scholars have dealt with it. But that requires you to have done very extensive research. I did a presentation on Monday to help students get ready for a debate, right, on the same statute issue. Now, I looked at a book where it said that there's supposedly this train incident that happened to Gandhi, right? Now, Gandhi wrote some 5,000 pages before he first mentioned this accident. 16 years after it supposedly happened was the first time he mentioned anything. Now, he mentioned everything that happened to every Indian. This one tripped, he mentions it. This one had this happen to him on a train, he mentioned it. At no point did he ever mention it. But I wanted to make sure. So he has these 98 volumes, it's 47,000 pages as PDF. I didn't read every single one, but I did a search via PDF of the word train. So the first 58 pages of his collected works are before 1893, before the date that this was supposedly happening. So I just discounted those. You can't talk about it before it happens. But then I documented every single thing that he wrote, which was almost 5,000 pages before 1909. It was the first thing that happened. So now, after I've combed through 5,000 pages, that's where I can say at no point did he mention this. And it's on the basis of actually having gone through it, right? But again, if you aren't sure, you haven't done that research, or you're not able to do that type of thorough research, you'll want to use a hedge. Few, little, handful. But these no, none, or not are very much stronger. Now, verbs: to challenge, deter, disregard, exclude, fail, hinder. So other scholars have failed to deal with this type of thing, or others have had this type of hindrance in their studies, right? They were hindered by money, but since I'm a billionaire, I can do it. I know so many of us in this classroom are billionaires, so I know you can use that type of thing. Or ignore. Previous scholars have ignored this type of thing, right? Other verbs: lack, limit, misinterpret. That's very strong. Neglect, obviate, omit, overlook, prevent, question, restrict. Now again, once you've gone over all these types of articles like Swales did, he's saying these are the terms, these are the key words that people use to trigger and let you know that this is what I'm about to do. You can also use adjectives such as difficult, dubious, elusive, inadequate, incomplete, inconclusive, inefficacious, ineffective, inefficient, questionable. That's very, there's a lot of value judgment in that one. Scarce, uncertain, unclear, unconvincing, unproductive, unreliable, unsatisfactory. Now, when you're making these types of claims, you'll need to be very firm in the reasons why you're saying that. Otherwise, you're opening yourself up for attack. Right? So alternatives, and this is where we are coming from in terms of what we're thinking about when we usually think about problem, right? You may prefer not to adopt a negative stance in your writing when placing it within the context of prior research. In such cases, an alternative approach is to utilize a neutral contrastive statement that expresses a new perspective without giving the appearance of trying to diminish the validity of other people's research. This is what we're talking about in terms of continuing a tradition. It's not that what they're doing is bad or inadequate, but I'm still trying to give reason for why my research needs to be done. Examples of how this can be achieved include the following statements, with A representing the findings of prior research, B presenting your research problem, and X presenting one or more variables that have been investigated. So you can say A, the research has focused on A rather than on B. So there's not necessarily a value judgment in that. That's just what they've done, right? It's not negative, it's not confrontational, it's not competitive. You're just saying this is what they did. Research into A can be useful, but to counterbalance X, it is important to consider B, right? Again, not confrontational. It's just saying let's consider it from another perspective. These studies have emphasized X as opposed to B. While prior studies have examined X, it may be preferable to contemplate rather the impact of B. After consideration of A, it is important to also recognize B, right? All of these are very friendly. You almost want to hug these statements. The study of A, academic. You thought I forgot. Just because I did. That's why I didn't say it so much today. Academic. 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 Oh, yeah. So alternatives. The study of A has been exhaustive, and that's even a compliment. But changing circumstances related to X support the need for revisiting B, right? The last study was in the 70s. Last study was in 2000. We're in 2016. Now we need to move these things forward. Although considerable research has been devoted to A, less attention has been paid to B. This research offers insight into the need for A, though consideration of B is also helpful. And then these are our references. Again, those were the 3 links that I gave you. Most of what we covered today is in those 3 links. Then these are some of the books that we talked about. So any questions with regard to last week's papers, this week's seminar, or our class for today? Oh, is this information helpful to anyone? Everything that we've been covering? Is it just a review for anyone? Are we going too slow? It's okay. Okay. Could I get Miller Hernandez Diaz to come up? Isaac Amechi. I would never guess that by looking at the spelling. I would never guess that by looking at the spelling. Amechi.
Yes.
Okay. This is how spelling can influence pronunciation, and pronunciation can influence spelling. But thank you. Okay. No problem. No problem. Yeah, please correct me if I mispronounce anyone's name. Echo Khan. Is it Khan or Khan? Khan. Okay. Wilhelmina Tete. Is it Tete or Tete? Tete. I know if you change the tones, it's something different, right? Tete. So which one is that? Tete. Your own. What is that one?
Tete.
Tete.
But it's supposed to be Tete.
Tete. This is what I'm getting. Say it how it's supposed to be. Is birth order, right?
Yes.
So which one is that?
Tete.
No, which order? Is it second born, third born?
Second.
Second.
Yes.
Okay. Tete. Tete. Okay. Okay. Sarah Edu. Edu. Okay. I thought this was just an anglicized way.
Yeah, there could be a reason to that.
Yeah.
Because the early teachers were writing.
Exactly.
That's how come some people.
Yeah. Because this is what I'm familiar with, is that you had original names in Akan and Gan, whatever, but based on how Europeans chose to write it, people started pronouncing it like how Europeans were pronouncing it. So if it's Edu, I would definitely follow that. However, like you're saying, a lot of things started to change, people pronouncing their names because Europeans were mispronouncing their names. They didn't know how to pronounce it. So even Prof. Kofi Asare Opoku, he did a video where he was talking about how people say lampte, because Europeans spell lampte, and it's supposed to be lante. So he was giving what each one was. He gave Akana examples, Ga examples, other examples. Right. Right. Exactly. Kuntu becomes Blankson. Blanket. So he said, because your name is Blanket, I'll call you Blanket. That's a very extreme example, but the other ones are more subtle. Okay. Clement Kwesi Mensah. That was another one that Prof. Sarapoku was saying, that people say Mensah, but it's supposed to be Mensah, like Miensa. But he's saying that people themselves aren't pronouncing their own names because Europeans didn't know how to pronounce it. So now we're following behind Europeans who didn't know how to pronounce our names, as opposed to asserting that, no, this is supposed to be my name. Kweku, Kwedu, Bonaventure.
They're quite close to.
Is it Kwedu?
Kwedu.
Kwedu, okay.
I think it's a corrupt form of Kwedu.
Kwedu, okay. Now there's two. One is now there are two. So Kwedu is banana, but Kwedu is to do a case or a charge against someone. Me bono Kwedu. You understand?
I understand.
Right.
But I think this one was with
Kwedu.
reference to
Banana.
one who had a banana plantation.
Okay. Yeah. So, but these are the things, as we're talking about African studies, these are very, very relevant. I'm actually working on a paper on African names, and all of these types of issues will come up. Sandra Usu. Bismarck Kwame. Now, do you do Ofori or Ofori? Ofori. Because I've heard people pronounce it both ways.
Yes.
Ofori and Ofori. The Ofori sounds a bit anglicized to me. Yeah? Yeah. Akwiafo. Yeah. 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 So these are things that linguists find exciting. Others are like, who cares? But this is why we all can focus on what we focus on. Any questions from anyone, and we'll close on that. If anyone has anything on your paper. Any questions about anything that I marked? The other thing on the name issue is also the place names. So you have like Kibi. Is that Chibi? Yeah. No, Chibi is the original one. Yeah. So Kibi is the English one. So we're so accommodating that we say, even though I know how to pronounce it, let me pronounce it like someone who doesn't know how to pronounce it. Yeah. Akim. Yeah. 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 No, it's not. It's not a bald name. So Sekon is the name of the Obosom, and then De is thing. So Takura is Takura's thing. So anytime you have the name of the Obosom, you say this is that Obosom's thing. So Takura De, Sekon De, all of them.
The Amantes also said that Pepe, I'm being hurt by Pepe. Is a Kume. So
when I went on the field,
Mm-hmm.
I was told by 3 different groups
Mhm.
that it's a corrupted version of the Ezekumi,
Mm.
which eventually became
It's a kume.
Yes. So there are different versions of
Yeah.
the Ezekumi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you would.
Ahanta, yeah,
So
Ezekumi.
definitely I go, rather than the other
Mm,
one.
mm, mm. And then, so in place names and personal names, you see all these things. So anytime you see a DID, you know it's supposed to be D, this one thing. Okay, if no questions about this one, Nkrumah. Yeah. Now I've heard too. One was that it's supposed to be ninth born. Other one is supposed to be only child, but it's from Nzema. I don't know Nzema, but whatever that one is supposed to be.
They don't pronounce it the way they are used to.
Nkrumah. That's in Nzema. Yeah. Oh, so you know, yeah, Nkrumah. Yeah. Yeah, someone pronounced that for me. It's like reeds, the growing reeds or something. Aflau, 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 aflau.
The F sounds like
It's aflau. It's this tongue thing. Yes.
it will be between P and F.
Aflau, aflau.
But then it looks like the language borrowed a lot from German.
Mm.
So it's like, you know, say it's like ewe.
Mm.
Ewe.
Evergbe. Evergbe.
Yeah, W is always here.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, I think we're okay. So in that case, we'll close out.